Welcome back to Going Bush, where we find ourselves in Victoria's high country, which is the heartland, Andrew, of the state's native timber production.
Nick, it is. Now, Victoria is a relatively small state, but it's got a lot of trees. It in fact has almost 8 million hectares of native forest.
And that is a big number. A less big number is 0.1%, which is the amount of those trees which are available for harvest each year. Now, before one single stem is touched, there is a massive and rigorous planning operation to make sure the harvest is done just right.
Nearly 36%, or 7.8 million hectares of Victoria, is covered with native forest. The vast majority of that is in national parks and other reserves, with only 450,000 hectares, or 6%, available and suitable for the production of timber.
It's within that area of available forest that the VicForests tactical planning team carry out their job of finding coops suitable for harvest.
The planner's job is to ensure they identify and protect a long list of special values.
Across the state, there's obviously a range of biodiversity values, some of those being things like the long-footed potoroo in the east and leadbeater possum in Central Highlands. As well as that, there's issues with catchment areas, so for water quality. There's recreational areas, so your picnic areas, campsites, those sorts of things. And then there's cultural, so Indigenous, and as well as historic.
Once a harvest area is identified, the first step is for a forest plan to be drawn up from maps of the area.
All right, so what I have here in my hands is a forest plan for a coop, and the guys in the office have taken months and months to get to this point. It's even got a map of do's and don'ts on that particular coop.
The interesting thing, though, that this is a map of what might be out there.
Yes.
The important point now is to go out into the bush and actually prove the values that exist on that map are out in the bush. Because not all values are identified on a map, carrying out a field inspection gives VicForest planners, as well as biodiversity and conservation biologists, the chance to have a more in-depth look at the area. So this is a really good example of where you find something that's out in the bush that may not necessarily exist on a map. These two trees, these big trees, represent potential leadbeater possum habitat.
That's exactly right, and the planners are well trained in sort of finding their habitat. It might not be just the big live tree, but this dead stag as well. And if there's enough of a concentration of potential homes for leadbeater possums, then a whole new raft of rules and regulations come into play.
The tiny leadbeater's possum is only found in Victoria and was once considered extinct, but is now just one of the many endangered animals that require protection.
Although a leadbeater's is rarely seen, it does live in these ash forests, and planners have the responsibility to protect it.
We don't actually need to find the species or identify that species in the field to mark out the habitat. We're really looking for the mature senescing trees and the stags that actually provide their habitat. So no, we don't actually need to identify the possum.
Another value which will need protection on this particular coop is this small pocket of rainforest, larger than originally identified on the map.
This kind of area we'd identify out in the field and then mark it on a map and make sure that we get the right buffering for it. So we have to mark where it is, mark the extent of it, and then once we've found the extent of it all, then we put that appropriate buffer to it.
With the planners now having found leadbeater's possum habitat and a pocket of rainforest, the recce also confirms another special value that needs protecting. This old mill site left by foresters from the early 1900s is now a site of historic importance.
Once the pre-harvest survey is carried out, there's one more step before harvesting can begin.
Once VicForests have worked through their entire planning process, the coops that we're proposing for harvest go out for a community consultation period. So that's a month-long period where the maps of proposed areas are sent out to the community, and anyone can access those and then provide comment regarding any values they think might be present in the areas.
Around 6% of Victoria's native bush is available and suitable for timber production. Of that, less than 4,500 hectares of forest is harvested and regrown each year.
Before contractors can move into a coop, a forest plan is completed, that plan generally taking between 1 and 3 years and taking into account a number of biodiversity, cultural and historic values. On average, once a plan is complete, around 30% of a coop approved for harvest is left untouched to protect these different values. Now, after the break, some of the fun ways to spend a day in the forest, including a spot of orienteering, or as the gurus call it, cunning running.